So now the nuts, seeds, nut butters, and tahinis. Well, seeds are a little bit less calorically dilute. They're about only 2,600 calories per pound, but nuts can go up to 3,200 calories a pound. And again, these are very healthy, but these are very calorically dense. And this is why I stayed so fat for so long, because even eating a mere 1 ounce a day, I could not drop any weight. Remember, our ancestors did eat some of these foods, but they came in a hard shell for a reason, and they were seasonal. And they weren't going to Costco and eating 3-pound bags of roasted, salted nuts. So these are nuts, and to me, these are a real pleasure trap food. I find them very, very hard to moderate the use of, and many of the people I work with feel the same way. And you can see in terms of calorie density, 400 calories of walnuts, or not even 400 calories of potatoes. What is going to fill you up more? Remember, you need volume if you're going to activate stretch receptors. And when I mentioned about how when you process a food, you make it calorie rich and nutrient poor, when you process it, just like with the smoothie, you also decrease the volume. So look at these. When you take 4 ounces of whole nuts and make it into nut butter, it's about half as much now. And that peanut butter there for 400 calories, that's not going to fill you up. I mean, that's barely going to coat a piece of bread if you could even eat just one piece of that. So for me and many other people I work with, peanut butter is akin to crack. Now, I want to show you a real example from a real world, my real world. Now, for 8 years, I had the privilege of working at the True North Health Center. And I know that Dr. Goldhammer has been a speaker and is a speaker on this wonderful conference. And I worked there from anywhere from 2 to 5 weeks every Christmas, running a program called the Holiday Extravaganza. And we were permitted to serve whole food desserts during that time, made out of things like fruits and nuts. So what you see on the left is something that I call the world's healthiest pecan pie, which we serve there every New Year's Eve. And it was allowed by Dr. Goldhammer. There's only 2 ingredients, raw pecans and raw dates, and that's it. And what you're seeing on that plate is 1/12 of the pie, which is what we serve to each patient. Now, for my mouth and the way I eat, that was about 8 bites of food. Remember, we said at the beginning, calorie density can also be looked at as calories per bite of food. So that's about 8 bites of food for me, maybe 10 if I'm not scarfing it. That piece of pie has 750 calories, almost 40 grams of fat. The plate on the right is a typical lunch that I would eat. That's a roasted Hannah yam that probably weighed about 2 pounds before cooking, 1.5 pounds after cooking, and 4 artichokes steamed. And that has about 600 calories. Now, what do you think is going to fill you up more? So here's an example from my life. I was eating 1 ounce of nuts a day for a year, and I could not drop weight. But once I got the fat out of my diet, and I know Dr. McDougall is speaking on this conference, and he can speak to why for some people, especially women, and especially people that have been overweight a long time, because we all vary in the degree to which how much fat we can eat and remain fat. When I switched it, a food that was 3,200 calories per pound to one that was less than 400 calories per pound that has been vilified throughout most of my existence, I finally dropped weight. And I want to take a moment to talk about potatoes, because a lot of people bash potatoes, especially white potatoes. If you look at even throughout human history, there have been studies done with only potatoes. If you were to Google KON, the KON potato study, and this was not about veganism or anything, these people were actually athletes and they ate nothing but white potatoes for a year. They actually had to add oil to their diet to get enough calories. And after 1 year of eating nothing but potatoes, they had 0 nutritional deficiencies. Andrew Spudfit Taylor is a gentleman from Australia who suffered from depression and food addiction and ate nothing but potatoes for 1 year and regained his health and lost 120 pounds. And at the end of his experiment, again, had no nutritional deficiencies. Chris Voigt was the head of the Washington Potato Commission, and he actually spoke at one of Dr. McDougall's conferences. Now, he wasn't even vegan, but he was upset that the government said you could no longer use food stamps to buy potatoes. So he ate nothing. I think his blog is 20 potatoes a day or 30 potatoes. I'm sorry, I don't remember. I could look that up. But the point is doing that, not even in a healthful vegan way, he still lost weight, lowered his triglycerides, lowered his cholesterol. So potatoes are pretty much nature's perfect food for health and weight loss. Now, again, I'm not opposed to people eating nuts, but I can tell you that for most people that suffer from food addiction, they have a hard time moderating the use of them. So I recommend doing seeds, things like flaxseed or chia seeds. Usually for most people, a tablespoon of ground flaxseed a day is sufficient to get enough of your omega-3 fatty acids. I have not added any overt fats to my diet in over 10 years. I get my blood tested every year at my physical for something called my omega-3 fatty acids. It's a blood test called the fatty acid profile, where they test my omega-3, 6, my ratio, my ALA, my EPA, my DHA. And because I'm not eating anything competing like oils or omega-6s, and because I eat so many greens, every year my fatty acid profile gets better and better. So don't think that you have to eat nuts. A tablespoon of ground flax or chia for most people a day is absolutely perfect if you're worried. Now, I did devise a way to tell if people are eating too many nuts, and this is how. If you look like Curly. Okay. So now 4,000 calories a pound, we have something that I don't even consider a food, but it's on the chart. And this is probably the easiest thing to take out of your diet if you want to experience any weight loss. And that is oil, all oil. Yes, even cold pressed extra virgin olive oil, blessed by the Pope. Oil is the most calorically dense, nutrient poor food on the planet. Oil is a triumph of science over marketing. And yes, we do need fat, but if you want to eat fat, eat it the way God and nature intended in its whole food form, nuts and seeds and avocado, and maybe even whole coconut. But remember, those came in a hard shell for a reason. Oil is for cars. It's not for humans to ingest. And while this is a lecture on weight loss, I know that Dr. Esselstyn has been a speaker in this wonderful conference, and he's talked about how oil is injurious to our endothelial cells. These are the life jacket of our circulatory system. And if we want to prevent and reverse heart disease, it's something we have to take out of our diet. But I want to talk to you about it in terms of caloric density. 400 calories of oil doesn't even register to your satiety mechanisms. You can barely even see it in the jar. And the thing that's so interesting is I did an experiment on my husband against his will, and let me tell you about this. So in 2008, it was August 1st, 2008, I adopted an SOS-free plant-exclusive diet. I was already plant-exclusive, but I was still eating some sugar, oil, and salt. When I heard Dr. Esselstyn speak that we can be bulletproof against heart disease, I just gave it up on the spot. Well, I did all the cooking in the family, and I still do. And I would make my husband's breakfast, send a lunch with him to work, and then make his dinner. And all I did was I took out the oil. And about 7 months later, and my husband's very tall, he's 6 feet tall, and he's never been overweight. And about 7 months after dropping the oil, we had to go to a bar mitzvah on a Saturday, and he went to put his suit and belt on, and he could no longer buckle his belt. It was way too big. And we didn't own a scale at the time. He's like, oh my God, I must have cancer. He didn't know. He lost about 13 pounds. Now, if somebody that was already quite thin, that doesn't need to lose weight, that doesn't want to lose weight, that's being experimented on against their will, could lose that much weight just by omitting oil, imagine what you could do if you did it on purpose. They've also done experiments at restaurants where they have created meals that you would typically get at a restaurant, like say a pasta primavera, where the pasta is cooked in water and there's oil and salt in the pasta water. When they take the pasta out, they douse it with more oil and they make a marinara with oil. And then they make one at home that I would make, like from one of my books, where I'm using a gluten-free pasta that's not cooked in oil, where I'm not adding extra oil or butter or steaming the vegetables and making a marinara without oil. And they showed that the restaurant identical meal, 500 calories more. And when they tested it on the subjects, they had no more satiety, but they ate 500 calories because oil slips under the radar undetected by your stretch, nutrient, and calorie receptors. And when you eat at a restaurant, you are having more oil and more sugar and salt for that matter than you ever would at home. And here's the thing, restaurants don't have to tell you how much oil they use. And it blew my mind when I learned this from some of these doctors, is that yes, even restaurants, they give you calorie counts in their food. They're giving you the calories in the ingredients. It doesn't count for the extra 500 calories of oil that they're sauteing with the pan or adding. They don't have to even disclose that. So you're always going to have way more fat and calories. And you know, 1 tablespoon of olive oil, 14 grams of saturated fat, minimum daily requirement of saturated fat is none. And for the same amount of calories in 1 mere tablespoon of olive oil, you could have 2 pounds of zucchini. What's going to fill you up more? Now, many of you have probably already seen this slide. It's used very much in the plant-based community. But again, the 400 calories of oil barely gets registered by our mechanism satiety. And we could put 400 calories of animal products like chicken or cheese or anything in there. And yeah, you'll have a little bit more fullness. But look what happens when we put 400 calories to the left of the red line food in our stomachs. Fruits, vegetables, whole grains, and legumes, we're going to feel full. And then you do that 3, 4, 5 times a day, depending on your caloric needs. And this is how you eat more, weigh less, lose weight with a full plate.